everybody. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my report. My presentation was on the effects of ability grouping. I chose this topic because I'm a third year teacher, and all 3 years I've spent in the same school and district, and I've never seen ability grouping in action before. Prior to um, my years teaching out in Colorado, I never heard of it. So I was more curious to see just kind of what the effects of it were, because I've been in the system working with it for a little bit. So, like, when you think of probably when you and I went to school, we typically would go to kindergarten. We would progress to first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, just at a calendar year's time. We were grouped with kids at our same age, as opposed to kids who are at our same skill level. What WPS did, Westminster Public Schools, is they adopted a competency based learning system. So no longer after first grade are students grouped by their age, they're grouped within classrooms dependent upon their skill. So you may have a fifth grader, and this fifth grade age student might be working on level four math targets because they weren't able to complete level four. But they also may be working on level five and six literacy targets because they stayed on par with their literacy standards and even moved a little farther ahead. Um, but because they couldn't show proficiency in with their math, they're in a level four math. And so what happens is when you progress throughout your elementary school, your K through five, you start to see, especially in third, fourth, and fifth grade classrooms, students from different ages. And the thought behind it is if we group these students by ability as opposed to age, they'll all make better growth. And what happens is you get students into one of these three categories. They're either in the low achieving group, the grade level achieving group, so just on par, or they're in a high achieving group. And scholars debate, is this the best way to really group students? If you're trying to maximize efficiency and get the highest level of student achievement possible, is grouping kids by ability the best way to do it? That's really the question. Um, so the first thing I looked at was student achievement. And there are studies from the past 100 years up until now that talk about student achievement. And it truly doesn't matter which ones you look at. Most of the time, if not all the time, you're going to see that the middle and high achieving groups, they typically make more progress in an ability group setting as opposed to a heterogeneous or a classroom by age. But you very rarely get the lower groups, the low achieving group. Very rarely do they make their growth goals. So what you find when you look back is the middle and the high achieving students, ability grouping works great. Lower achieving students, more often than not, it doesn't work out as great as they had hoped. Um, so the benefits for the gifted, again, you can read on and you'll see that you'll see that students in the higher achieving classrooms grow more than they do in a heterogeneous class. The teacher can differentiate the materials to meet their needs. They can progress quickly. They can dive deeper into topics, especially when you put them together. The collaboration is probably one of the best benefits for them. Just because they can talk with their peers about it, they can have deeper conversations because they're at that higher ability. So when you look, that's one of the biggest benefits is the collaboration leads to more learning for the higher learners. One of the biggest debates is can't you just differentiate? Can't you have students in the classroom of the same age and the teacher differentiate? Yes, but differentiation isn't the sole what's the word? It's not the key ingredient that's gonna get you the best results. Um, from my findings, I understood that differentiation is important, but it's most useful in a setting of ability group students because you can differentiate to meet their needs. It's a more narrow focus as opposed to a whole class. Now, this is probably the biggest trend that's most concerning are the disadvantages for the low ability students. You want to see them progress to the grade level and above the high group, but very rarely does this happen. They still grow. Doesn't really matter what study you look at, you're going to see student growth, but it's typically not at the rate that the teacher had hoped for. So they grow, but it's not like this is the answer that will get a kid from a lower ability group up to a higher ability group. Um, And then, of course, they look at the effects of self esteem. Does a high ability learner, how do they view themselves? How do low ability learners view themselves? Does that group affect their self confidence? To my surprise, the research articles that I've read say that they really don't. The high achieving students reported feeling more comfortable because they weren't labeled the too smart kids, and the lower achieving students felt more comfortable because they were with peers that were more at their level, which was surprising to me because I thought it would actually negatively affect their self esteem. The teacher's opinion, as you might guess, it kind of depends on what group you're working with. The lower ability groups teachers, they feel the pressure from the test scores. They're worried that they're not making as much progress as the teacher working with grade level students across the hall maybe, because their students are at that level. So it really kind of affects the teachers who work with the lower ability groups. Their self-esteem usually drops and their stress levels usually rise. Teachers who work with students who are on grade level and above, they like it because, again, you can just narrow in that scope. You're working with higher achievers, you can push them further, um, and you can focus on their needs more. But unlike the lower ability group teacher, you're usually not working with as many behavior problems, and you don't have the challenge of filling in as many gaps as they talk about. Um, and so when you kind of think about this whole system having a low, a middle, and a high group, the thought on paper is it's kind of like the mental discipline theory. We believe that if we have students who are working on the skills that they need to the most through repetition, scaffolding, and good instruction, they will learn it. They will learn it. So they can take that mental discipline theory and they can apply the pros to both the high, the medium, and the low. We'll have all of our students working on whatever they need, and with the right practice and the right instruction, they will master the skills. So I tied the mental discipline theory into this grouping system because I believe that's why instructors implement it, largely because of what the mental disciplinary says about learning. Um, but I think one thing that's super important to be aware of is uh, who makes up the lower ability groups. Um, it's typically learners from low socioeconomic backgrounds, predominantly African American students and Hispanic students. So you want to be conscious of that because you don't want like one ethnicity or one minority group to make it up. You obviously want those kids progressing just as any other student would. But it also, guys, it really talks to, or it speaks to the importance of why reading specialists are important. It is hard. It doesn't matter what group you're working with, low, high. In the reports that I talked about, or I'm sorry, in the studies that I talked about, teachers felt unprepared to work with both the low and a high achieving students. So if you can well round yourself and make yourself more skilled to work with the students that you serve, it's a bigger benefit. And teachers have reported feeling not comfortable. So through our graduate program and through all the learning that we're doing, it should help us be more prepared to work in an ability group setting or whatever setting the administration feels is best. Thank you for taking the time. Enjoy your weekend.